The private dining room at Bellini's was reserved for men who didn't appear on guest lists. Gemma Rossi had worked enough of these events to recognize the type: expensive suits, quiet voices, the particular tension of people discussing things that could never be spoken in daylight. She kept her head down, her tray steady, and her ears closed to anything that might get her killed. Tonight was different. Tonight, she couldn't stop watching the man at the head of the table. Alessandro Ferraro sat like a king holding court, his dark hair swept back from a face that belonged on Renaissance paintings, sharp cheekbones, a jaw carved from marble, eyes the color of aged bourbon, warm and dangerous in equal measure. He commanded the room without raising his voice, every gesture deliberate, every word weighted with power that made the other men lean in like plants seeking sun. He was beautiful. He was terrifying. And in approximately 3 minutes, he was going to be dead. Gemma had seen it happen. Not the death itself. Not yet. But the preparation. The server who'd brought his wine, the one with the nervous hands and the sweat beading at his temples. She'd watched him through the kitchen window, watched his lips move as he spoke to a man in the alley. The dose is enough. He won't make it to dessert. Lip reading. A skill she'd learned from necessity, growing up with a father whose hearing had been stolen by a factory accident when she was 6. She'd spent her childhood catching words others thought were private, building a vocabulary of secrets she'd never asked to know. Most of the time, she ignored what she saw. Safer that way. Smarter. But she couldn't ignore this. The poisoned glass sat in front of Alessandro Ferraro, dark wine catching the candlelight like liquid rubies. His hand moved toward it, casual, automatic, the gesture of a man who'd never had reason to fear his own table. Gemma's body moved before her mind caught up. She crossed the room with her tray of appetizers, angling toward the head of the table, her heart hammering so loud she was certain everyone could hear it. Alessandro's fingers closed around the stem of the glass. He raised it toward his lips. She leaned down, pretending to adjust a napkin, and let her mouth brush close to his ear. Don't drink it. 3 words. Barely a breath. The barest whisper of sound that no one else in the room could possibly have heard. Alessandro Ferraro went still. His hand froze with the glass halfway to his mouth. She felt his attention shift. A physical thing. The weight of those bourbon eyes turning toward her with an intensity that made her want to run. What did you say? Low. Controlled. Dangerous. The wine. She kept her head down, kept arranging the napkin, kept her voice so soft it barely existed. It's been poisoned. The server. I saw him. In the alley. I read his lips. A long moment. An eternity compressed into seconds. Then Alessandro set the glass down with exquisite care and lifted his hand. Everyone out. The words weren't loud. They didn't need to be. Every man at the table froze, confusion rippling through them like a stone dropped in still water. Alessandro? One of the older men leaned forward. What's... now? Something in his voice had changed. The warmth was gone, replaced by ice and iron. Men who'd been laughing moments before scrambled to their feet, gathering belongings, moving toward the door with the urgent efficiency of people who knew better than to argue. In 90 seconds, the room was empty. Empty except for Alessandro, Gemma, and the poisoned glass sitting between them like a declaration of war. Sit. He gestured to the chair beside him. I should get back to work. Sit. Not a request. An absolute command wrapped in velvet. Gemma sat. Alessandro studied her with those impossible eyes, cataloging every detail of her face with the precision of a man who missed nothing. She felt stripped bare, exposed, like he could see through her second-hand blouse and tired eyes to the fear coiling in her chest. Your name? Gemma? Gemma Rossi. How long have you worked here, Gemma Rossi? 6 months. And in those 6 months, how many private events have you served? A dozen, maybe more. But tonight, he leaned forward, close enough that she caught the scent of him, sandalwood and something darker. Tonight, you decided to involve yourself in matters that could get you killed. Why? Because I'm not a murderer. The words came out sharper than she intended. I couldn't watch someone die and do nothing. I couldn't. She stopped, swallowed. My father always said silence in the face of evil is its own kind of sin. I don't know if that's true, but I couldn't live with myself if I'd stayed quiet. Something shifted in Alessandro's expression. A crack in the granite, revealing something almost human beneath. You read lips? Since I was 6. My father is deaf. I learned to catch what he missed. And you saw the server speaking to someone? In the alley? Yes. A man. I didn't recognize him, but the server. His name is Paolo, I think. He was terrified. He said. She hesitated. The dose is enough. He won't make it to dessert. Alessandro's jaw tightened. He reached for his phone, spoke rapid Italian she couldn't follow, then set it down and returned his attention to her. Paolo has been detained. He'll tell us who paid him before the night is over. The cold certainty in his voice made her shiver. But that leaves a question. You. Me? You saved my life. He said it like a simple fact, like stating that the sky was blue or water was wet. In my world, that creates a debt. It also creates a problem. A problem? Whoever ordered this, they'll learn what happened. They'll learn that a waitress intervened. His eyes held hers, and she saw the calculation there, the weighing of options. They'll come for you, Gemma Rossi. Not tonight, maybe not tomorrow, but soon. You've made yourself a target. The cold spread through her chest, wrapping around her lungs. She'd known, in some distant way, that there would be consequences, but hearing it spoken aloud. What do I do? You have 2 options. Alessandro's voice softened, just slightly. You can run. Leave the city tonight. Start over somewhere far from here. I can give you money, documents, a head start. He paused. Or you can come with me. Stay under my protection until the people responsible are dealt with. Why would you protect me? Because you saved my life when you had every reason to look away. Because you have a skill that's rare and valuable. Because... He stopped. Something flickered behind his eyes. There and gone. Because I haven't met someone who surprised me in a very long time. Gemma's mind raced. Running meant leaving everything. Her father in his small apartment, the job that barely paid her bills, the life she'd scraped together from nothing. But staying meant stepping into a world of violence and power she didn't understand. My father, she said. I can't leave him. He's alone. He needs me. He'll be protected too. Anyone you care about. Alessandro's voice carried the weight of absolute promise. No one touches what's mine. I'm not yours. No. That almost smile again, the one that transformed his face from terrifying to devastating. But you could be. Under my protection, at least. Until this is resolved. The word until hung between them. A boundary. A possibility. Gemma thought of her father's face, the fear he'd carry if he knew what she'd done. Thought of Paolo in that alley, trembling hands and desperate eyes. Thought of what it would mean to run forever. Always looking over her shoulder, never knowing when the past would catch up. Okay, she said. I'll come with you. Alessandro rose from his chair in one fluid motion, extending his hand to help her up. His palm was warm, rough with calluses that didn't match his tailored suit. He held on a moment longer than necessary. You're either very brave or very foolish, Gemma Rossi. Probably both. Probably. He guided her toward a door she hadn't noticed, hidden in the wall's paneling. But I've always admired people who choose courage over comfort. The door opened onto a private corridor, then stairs, then a car waiting in the darkness. Gemma climbed inside and watched the restaurant. Her job, her normal life, everything familiar, disappear behind them. She'd whispered 3 words to a stranger, and now her entire world had changed. The Ferraro estate rose from the darkness like a fever dream made stone. Gemma pressed her face to the car window as they wound through iron gates and up a drive lined with ancient oaks. The house that emerged was massive, a sprawling villa of weathered stone and climbing roses, lit by warm light that spilled from dozens of windows. It looked like something from a fairy tale, the kind of place where princesses waited and monsters lurked in equal measure. Her apartment could have fit in the foyer alone. "My staff will show you to a room," Alessandro said as the car stopped. "Tomorrow, we'll discuss arrangements. Tonight, you rest." "My father is already being moved to a secure location. My men will ensure he's comfortable and protected." Alessandro's voice softened at the edges. "He'll be told you're safe. Nothing more." "He'll worry." "Yes, but he'll be alive to worry. That's what matters." He was right. She hated that he was right. The room they gave her was larger than her entire apartment. 4-poster bed, marble bathroom, closet already stocked with clothes in her size. She didn't ask how they knew, didn't want to know. The reality of her situation was pressing down on her chest, making it hard to breathe. 6 hours ago, she'd been Gemma Rossi, waitress, anonymous, invisible, safe in her insignificance. Now she was a target. Sleep came in fragments, broken by nightmares she couldn't remember. When dawn finally painted the windows gold, she gave up pretending and wandered into the hallway, following the smell of coffee to a kitchen warm with morning light. She found Alessandro's mother instead of staff. The woman sat at a scrubbed wooden table, a cup of espresso in her weathered hands, silver hair pinned in an elegant twist. She looked up as Gemma entered, and her face, still beautiful despite the years, broke into a smile that transformed the room. "So you're the one." Her voice was accented, musical. "The girl who saved my son." Yes, I suppose." "Sit. Sit. I'm Lucia. Alessandro told me everything." She gestured to the chair across from her. "You read lips, like my cousin Maria. A rare gift." Gemma sat, accepting the espresso Lucia poured without asking. The normalcy of it, coffee, morning light, a mother's warmth, made the surreal quality of her situation even sharper. "He said I'm in danger." "You are. The Moretti family ordered the poisoning. They've been trying to destroy Alessandro for years, ever since he refused to merge our organizations." Lucia's eyes darkened. "They're not the kind of people who forget. Or forgive." "Then why am I here? Why not just give me money and send me away?" Lucia studied her for a long moment. "Because my son sees something in you. Something he hasn't seen in a long time." She reached across the table and patted Gemma's hand. "He's a hard man, my Alessandro. Life made him that way. But he's not cruel. And he doesn't offer protection lightly." Before Gemma could respond, Alessandro appeared in the doorway. He looked different in daylight, less like a painting, more like a man. Stubble shadowed his jaw. His shirt was open at the collar, sleeves rolled to his elbows. Human, almost approachable. "You're awake." His eyes swept over her, clinical, assessing, then softened slightly. "Good. We have things to discuss." He led her to a study lined with books and shadows, closing the door behind them with a finality that made her pulse jump. Sunlight streamed through tall windows, catching the dust motes dancing in the air. "I had you investigated." He didn't apologize for it. Gemma Rossi, 26 years old, only child. Mother died when you were 12, cancer. Father lost his hearing in a factory accident when you were 6, lost his job 2 years later. You've been supporting both of you since you were 16. His gaze held hers. You work 3 jobs. You haven't taken a vacation in 4 years. You send money to your father every month, even when it means you don't eat. The exposure of it, her entire life reduced to facts and figures, made her want to disappear. Why are you telling me this? Because I want you to understand that I know who you are, not just what you did last night, but who you've been your whole life. He moved closer and she refused to step back. You're a survivor, Gemma. You've been fighting since before you were old enough to know what fighting meant. That's not common. That's not something I take lightly. I didn't save you because I wanted something. I know. That's why I'm offering. He stopped in front of her, close enough that she had to tilt her head back to meet his eyes. Stay here. Work for me. Use that gift of yours. The lip reading, the observation, the ability to see what others miss. I'll pay you more than your 3 jobs combined. Your father will have the best care money can buy. And when the Moretti threat is eliminated, you'll be free to go wherever you want, with enough money to never work again. The offer hung between them, glittering and impossible. Why? She searched his face for the catch, the trap. You could have a dozen people with my skills. Why me? Because you didn't have to help me. His voice dropped, rough with something she couldn't name. You could have looked away. Should have, by any rational calculation. But you chose courage when cowardice was safer. You chose my life over your own safety. Something flickered behind his eyes. Vulnerability, quickly hidden. My brother made the same choice once. It cost him everything. Your brother? Later. The mask slid back into place. Do we have a deal, Miss Rossi? Gemma thought of her father in his cramped apartment, the medical bills piling up, the exhaustion that had become her constant companion. She thought of the life she'd been surviving rather than living, the dreams she'd buried so deep she'd forgotten they existed. She thought of Alessandro's eyes when he mentioned his brother, the crack in the armor, the grief he couldn't quite hide. I have conditions, she heard herself say. His eyebrow rose. You're in a position to make conditions? I'm in a position where you want something only I can give. She lifted her chin. I visit my father whenever I want. No restrictions, and I don't participate in anything illegal. I observe. I report. But I don't help hurt innocent people. A long pause. Then, slowly, that devastating, almost smile. Agreed. He extended his hand. Gemma took it. Welcome to the Ferraro family, Miss Rossi. Gemma, she corrected. If I'm going to work for you, you should use my name. Gemma. The word in his mouth sounded different, warmer. And you'll call me Alessandro. Sandro, if you prefer. My mother does. The familiarity felt dangerous, intimate in a way she wasn't prepared for, but she was in too deep to turn back now. Sandro, she repeated, testing the shape of it. This doesn't make us friends. No. His grip lingered on her hand, his eyes holding hers with an intensity that made her breath catch. But it makes us something. We'll figure out what along the way. He released her, and she felt the loss like a phantom limb. She was in so much trouble. The first week taught Gemma that Alessandro Ferraro's world operated by rules she'd never imagined. She attended meetings she didn't understand, positioned in corners where she could see faces others couldn't. Her job was simple: watch, read, report. When lips moved in whispers meant to be secret, she caught them. When expressions flickered with hidden meaning, she noted them. She became a ghost with eyes, invisible and invaluable. The information she gathered was startling. Alliances she wouldn't have guessed. Loyalties more fragile than they appeared. Men who smiled at Alessandro while planning betrayals she transcribed in neat handwritten notes each evening. "You're good at this." Alessandro found her in the library one night, her notes spread across the desk. "Better than I expected. I've been reading people my whole life. It's how you survive when you can't afford to trust anyone." Something shifted in his expression. "That sounds lonely." It was. She gathered her papers, avoiding his gaze. "Is sometimes." He didn't respond, but when she looked up, he was watching her with an intensity that made her skin prickle. Not threatening. Something else entirely. The second week brought her father to the estate. She hadn't expected it, had assumed secure location meant some distant safe house. But Alessandro had arranged for a cottage on the grounds, close enough that she could visit daily, far enough for privacy. Her father's confusion when she arrived had nearly broken her. "What is this place?" His hands moved in the familiar patterns of sign language. "Gemma, what have you gotten into?" "I'm safe, Papa. I have a good job. A good employer." The lies tasted bitter, but the truth would taste worse. "You're going to be taken care of. Properly. No more worrying about money." Her father's eyes, sharp despite his years, despite everything life had stolen from him, searched her face. "You're not telling me everything?" "No, she wouldn't lie about that. But I'm okay. I need you to trust me." He'd pulled her into his arms, the way he had when she was small, and held on like he knew he was losing her to something he couldn't fight. Lucia found her crying in the garden afterward. "Ah, Piccola." The older woman settled onto the bench beside her, pressing a handkerchief into her hands. "The hardest part of protecting someone is lying to them. How do you stand it? This life, the secrets." "I've had 50 years of practice." Lucia's voice softened. "And I've learned that love means carrying burden so others don't have to. Your father is safe, cared for. That's what matters. But at what cost?" "There's always a cost." Lucia's weathered hand found hers. "The question is whether you're paying it for something worth having." Gemma thought of Alessandro, the way he looked at her, the way she'd started looking back. "I don't know yet," she admitted. "That's honest." Lucia squeezed her hand. "Keep being honest, Piccola. It's rarer than you think in this world." The third week, Alessandro told her about Marco. They were in his study, late evening, the remains of a working dinner spread between them. Gemma had noticed the photograph on his desk. Two boys, teenagers, arms slung around each other's shoulders, grinning with the particular joy of people who hadn't yet learned how cruel the world could be. "My brother," Alessandro said, following her gaze. "Marco. He was 4 years younger. The good one." That, almost smile, edged with pain. "Everyone said so." "What happened to him?" "The Morettis." The name was acid on his tongue. 3 years ago, Marco was trying to negotiate peace, a truce that would have ended generations of bloodshed. He believed people could change, could be better. His jaw tightened. "They shot him at the negotiating table, made me watch." Gemma's heart clenched. "Alessandro, he died in my arms." His voice was flat, controlled, but she could see the earthquake beneath the surface. "The last thing he said was, 'Don't become them.' He made me promise." His eyes found hers, and the pain there stole her breath. "I've spent 3 years trying to keep that promise, building power without cruelty, protecting what's mine without becoming the monster they expected." "Is that why you didn't kill Paolo? The server who poisoned your wine?" "He's in prison. He'll serve 20 years. His family is being provided for, because his children shouldn't suffer for his choices." Alessandro's mouth twisted. "The Morettis would have killed him. Killed his family. burned his house and salted the earth. But Marco asked me to be better. Gemma moved without thinking, crossed the space between them and took his hand. Rough, warm, trembling slightly beneath her touch. "You're keeping your promise," she said quietly. He'd be proud. Alessandro stared at their joined hands. When he looked up, his eyes were wet. "You're the first person who said that." His voice cracked. "Everyone else thinks I'm weak. That mercy is just another word for cowardice." "Then everyone else is wrong." The air between them shifted, thickened. She should pull away, should remember the boundaries, the reasons this was dangerous. But his hand turned beneath hers, fingers intertwining, holding on like she was the only solid thing in a world that kept trying to drown him. "Gemma." Her name in his mouth sounded like a prayer. "I know." She didn't let go. Wrong time, wrong circumstances, wrong everything. But he was leaning closer, his forehead nearly touching hers. "Tell me to stop. Tell me this is a terrible idea." "It's a terrible idea." And yet, and yet. He kissed her. Soft at first. A question, not a demand. His free hand rose to cup her face, thumb tracing her cheekbone with a gentleness that made her ache. Gemma kissed him back, all the walls she'd built crumbling to dust, and let herself fall. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, he pressed his forehead to hers. "That was a terrible idea," she finished, but she was smiling. The worst. He was smiling too. "We should probably not do it again." "Probably. Tomorrow." "Tomorrow," she agreed. They didn't make it to tomorrow. They didn't make it to the door. And when Gemma finally stumbled to her room as dawn painted the sky, her lips swollen and her heart racing, she knew with absolute certainty that she'd crossed a line she could never uncross. She was falling for Alessandro Ferraro, and she had no idea how to stop. The Morettis struck 4 days later. Gemma was visiting her father in the cottage when the explosion shook the estate. Glass shattered. Alarms screamed. Her father grabbed her arm, his eyes wide with fear he couldn't voice, his hand signing questions she didn't have answers to. "Stay here," she signed back. "Lock the door. Don't open it for anyone but me." She ran toward the main house. Smoke poured from the east wing. Guards shouted orders. Bodies lay in the garden, some in black suits, some in the gray uniforms of attackers. The smell of cordite and copper burned her throat. She found Lucia in the conservatory, being helped by 2 guards toward the safe room. The older woman's face was gray, but determined. "Gemma, thank God. Alessandro, he's in the study. They came for him specifically." "Is he?" "Go." Lucia pushed her toward the main house. "Go to him." Gemma ran. The study doors were shattered, the room a war zone of overturned furniture and broken glass. Alessandro stood in the center, blood streaming from a cut on his forehead, facing 3 men with weapons drawn. And behind them, smiling like the devil himself, stood a man she recognized from a photograph on Alessandro's desk. Not Marco, the other figure she'd glimpsed in the background of family portraits, the uncle who'd been cut out of the frame. "Vittorio," Alessandro snarled, "you sold us out." "I made a practical decision." The uncle's voice was silk over steel. "The Morettis offered a better deal. All I had to do was open a door. Marco trusted you. I trusted you. And look where trust got Marco." Vittorio raised his gun. "The Morettis send their regards, nephew. They're very eager to finish what they started 3 years ago." Gemma's eyes found Alessandro's across the room. She saw the fear there, not for himself, but for her. He shook his head minutely, desperately. "Run," his eyes pleaded. She didn't run. Instead, she looked at the window behind Vittorio, at the reflection that showed a figure moving in the hallway, one of Alessandro's men, positioning himself. She read the guard's lips through the glass. On 3. Gemma raised her hand, counted with her fingers where only Alessandro could see. 1, 2, 3. She dropped to the floor as the world exploded. Gunfire erupted from everywhere at once. Gemma pressed herself flat against the marble, hands over her head, as chaos consumed the study. She heard bodies falling, heard Vittorio's scream of fury, heard Alessandro's voice barking orders in Italian she couldn't follow. Then hands grabbed her, rough, urgent, and she was being hauled upright, a gun pressed to her temple. "Nobody move!" Vittorio's arm locked around her throat, dragging her backward. "Or the lip reader dies." The room froze. Alessandro stood 3 feet away, blood dripping from his temple, his chest heaving, a gun in his hand aimed at his uncle's head. Around them, the aftermath of violence. Vittorio's men down, Alessandro's guards flanking their boss, a standoff balanced on a knife's edge. "Let her go." Alessandro's voice was ice, pure, crystalline cold. "She has nothing to do with this." "She has everything to do with this. She's why you're still alive." Vittorio's laugh was ugly, desperate. "Did you think I didn't know? The waitress who whispered in your ear. The Morettis wanted her dead weeks ago. I convinced them to wait, to use her as leverage." His arm tightened around Gemma's throat. "Now I'm very glad I did." The pressure made it hard to breathe. Gemma forced herself to stay calm, to think. Vittorio was behind her, slightly to the left. His gun hand was steady, but his body was trembling. Adrenaline, fear, the particular desperation of a man who knew he was losing. She met Alessandro's eyes across the room, saw the terror there, not for himself, but for her. Saw the love he hadn't yet spoken trying to break through the mask of command. "Trust me," she mouthed. His jaw tightened. Almost imperceptibly, he nodded. Gemma went limp. It was an old trick, one her father had taught her when she was young, worried about her walking home alone from night shifts. Dead weight was hard to hold. Unexpected. It bought seconds that could mean survival. Vittorio stumbled, his grip loosening just enough for Gemma to twist, to drive her elbow back into his ribs with every ounce of strength she possessed. He grunted, the gun swinging wild. Alessandro fired. The shot took Vittorio in the shoulder, spinning him away from Gemma. She fell hard, scrambling across the floor on hands and knees, putting distance between herself and the man who'd held her captive. "Don't kill him!" She heard herself shout it. "Alessandro, don't!" He stood over his uncle now, gun aimed at Vittorio's head, his face a mask of rage and grief. His hand was steady, his eyes were not. "He sold us out. He helped kill Marco. He would have killed you." "I know." Gemma rose on shaking legs, crossing to stand beside him. "But you promised Marco. You promised to be better." "Some people don't deserve better." "Maybe not. But you deserve to keep your promise." She reached out, her hand covering his on the gun. Felt the tremor running through him. The war between vengeance and vow. "Don't let him take that from you too." The silence stretched. Vittorio lay bleeding on the floor, his face twisted with pain and something darker. The realization that mercy was a more devastating defeat than death. Slowly, deliberately, Alessandro lowered the gun. "Get him out of my sight," he said to his guards. "He'll face justice, real justice, courts, evidence, prison." His voice hardened. "The Morettis will learn what happens when they buy betrayal from my own family." As Vittorio was dragged away, cursing and spitting threats, Alessandro turned to Gemma. His composure cracked, really cracked, and suddenly he was just a man. Exhausted, grieving, desperately afraid. "Are you hurt?" His hands found her face, tilting it toward the light, searching for damage. "Gemma, are you—" "I'm okay." She caught his wrists, held them steady. "I'm okay." thanks to you. Thanks to me? A broken laugh escaped him. You saved yourself. That move. Where did you learn? My father. He was terrified of me working late shifts. Taught me everything he knew about getting out of bad situations. She pressed her forehead to his chest, feeling his heart pound against her skin. I've never actually had to use it before. His arms wrapped around her, crushing her against him. She felt him shaking. This man who commanded armies, who'd just watched his uncle try to kill her, who'd chosen mercy when revenge would have been so much easier. I thought I was going to lose you. His voice was ragged. When he had that gun to your head, I thought, you didn't. You won't. She pulled back to look at him, her hands framing his bloodied face. I'm not that easy to get rid of, Alessandro Ferraro. Sandro. His voice cracked on the name. You called me Sandro before. Sandro. She kissed him, hard, desperate, tasting blood and smoke and survival. I'm not going anywhere. Promise me. His hands tangled in her hair, holding her like she might dissolve. Promise me you'll stay. I promise. The words came easily, naturally. I promise. I promise. I promise. They stood in the wreckage of his study, surrounded by broken glass and spent shell casings, and held on to each other like the world was ending. Maybe it was. Or maybe it was just beginning. The cleanup took hours. Gemma helped where she could, bandaging wounds, coordinating staff, checking on Lucia and her father. Both were shaken but safe, protected by the guards Alessandro had stationed with them. Her father's hands moved rapidly when she finally reached him. What is happening? Gemma, tell me the truth. She knelt beside his chair, taking his weathered hands in hers. The man I work for has enemies. They attacked tonight. It's over now. Is this the life you've chosen? I didn't choose it, Papa. She thought of Alessandro's face when he'd lowered the gun, the promise he'd kept, the man he was fighting to become. But I'm choosing to stay. He's good, Papa. Underneath everything. He's good. Her father studied her face with the perception that had always seen through her walls. You love him. Yes. There was no point in lying. I think I do. Then be careful, figlia mia. His hands gentled. Love in dangerous places requires courage. Make sure yours doesn't run out. It won't. She kissed his forehead. I learned from the best. Dawn was breaking when she found Alessandro on the terrace, staring at the horizon with empty eyes. The cut on his forehead had been stitched. Gemma's work, her hands steady despite everything, but he looked hollowed out, depleted. She sat beside him without speaking. Let the silence stretch between them, comfortable and warm despite the cold morning air. Vittorio was like a father to me after my own died, Alessandro said finally. He taught me to ride horses, to play chess, to see 3 moves ahead in every negotiation. His voice fractured. I never saw this coming. Never imagined he could. You're not a mind reader. You couldn't have known. I should have. It's my job to know, to protect my family. He turned to look at her, and the devastation in his eyes stole her breath. What if I can't do this? What if I can't be what Marco wanted, what my mother needs, what you deserve? Then we figure it out together. Gemma took his hand, threading her fingers through his. I'm not going anywhere, remember? I promised. You promised before you knew what you were promising. I knew exactly what I was promising. She shifted closer, resting her head on his shoulder. I was promising you. All of you. The good parts and the broken parts and the parts that are still learning how to heal. Alessandro was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice was barely a whisper. I love you. The words landed in her chest and took root there, blooming into something she'd spent her whole life believing wasn't meant for her. I love you too. She lifted her head to meet his eyes. I think I have since you cleared that room on nothing but my word. Since you trusted a stranger because she chose courage over comfort. Your words. A ghost of a smile crossed his face. You saved my life with 3 words. And you saved mine by listening. He kissed her as the sun rose over the ruins of his world, painting the sky in shades of gold and rose. They were battered, broken in places that might never fully heal. But they were alive, and together. And that was enough. It had to be enough. For now, it was everything. 5 months later, Gemma stood in the garden and watched her father dance with Lucia. The summer evening was warm, golden light spilling across the estate's grounds as music drifted from the terrace. A small celebration, Lucia's 75th birthday, had grown into something larger, the household staff and trusted friends gathering to honor the woman who'd held the Ferraro family together through decades of chaos. Her father moved with surprising grace, leading Lucia through steps that transcended language. They'd become unlikely friends in the months since the attack, 2 people who understood loss and perseverance, who'd learned to find joy in small moments because the large ones were never guaranteed. Gemma's heart swelled watching them. This life she'd stumbled into, dangerous and complicated and nothing like anything she'd imagined, had given her father something she'd never been able to provide: community, purpose, a reason to smile that went beyond mere survival. You're staring again. Alessandro's voice came from behind her, warm with amusement. I'm admiring. She leaned back as his arms wrapped around her waist. There's a difference. He pressed a kiss to her temple. You've been saying that for months. I'm starting to think it's your answer for everything. Only the things worth admiring. The Moretti threat had dissolved like morning mist. Vittorio's testimony, extracted through legitimate legal channels as Alessandro had promised, had exposed the entire organization's leadership. Arrests, trials, convictions. The empire that had terrorized the city for generations crumbled under the weight of its own corruption, and Alessandro had watched it fall without becoming the monster they'd tried to make him. Marco's promise, kept. The legitimate businesses Alessandro had been building for years flourished without competition. The foundation he'd established in Marco's name, funding education and job training for at-risk youth, had become his legacy project, transforming power into something that healed rather than destroyed. Gemma had been by his side through all of it, not as an observer anymore, but as a partner. She'd discovered skills she never knew she had: reading rooms, understanding dynamics, helping Alessandro navigate negotiations with the particular insight that came from a lifetime of watching without being seen. She'd also finished her degree. Business administration, completed through night classes Alessandro had insisted on funding. You saved my life, he'd said when she protested. Let me give you options for yours. Options. She'd never had those before. Now they stretched before her like a garden in full bloom. I have something for you, Alessandro said, turning her in his arms. You're always giving me things. The car. The apartment for Papa. This is different. His expression had shifted, nervous in a way she'd never seen. Alessandro Ferraro, who faced down enemies without flinching, looked almost uncertain. Come with me. He led her through the gardens, past the fountain where they'd shared their first unguarded conversation, past the bench where she'd cried in Lucia's arms, to a clearing she'd never noticed before. Hidden by hedges, lit by strings of lights that hadn't been there that morning. In the center stood a table for 2, set with candles and flowers. And beside it, kneeling in the grass with a velvet box in his trembling hands, was Alessandro. Gemma's heart stopped. 5 months ago, you whispered 3 words that saved my life. His voice was rough, cracking at the edges. But that wasn't when you saved me. You saved me when you refused to let me become my worst self, when you saw something worth believing in underneath all the blood and darkness, when you held my hand and told me I was keeping my promise to Marco. His eyes glistened in the candlelight. You saved me by loving me, and I am asking, begging, for the chance to spend the rest of my life trying to deserve that love. He opened the box. The ring inside was simple and stunning. A single diamond surrounded by smaller sapphires, elegant without ostentation. The kind of ring chosen by someone who'd paid attention to every detail of who she was. This was my grandmother's, Alessandro said. She gave it to my grandfather when he had nothing. Before the money, before the power, before any of this. She chose him when he was just a man with dreams. His voice dropped to a whisper. I'm asking you to choose me the same way. Not for what I have. For who I'm trying to become. Gemma sank to her knees in front of him, her hands covering his, tears streaming down her cheeks. Yes. The word came out broken. Beautiful. Yes, Alessandro. Sandro. 1,000 times yes. He slid the ring onto her finger. A perfect fit, because of course it was. And then his mouth found hers, and she was laughing and crying and kissing him all at once. They knelt together in the hidden garden, surrounded by lights that turned the darkness into stars, and Gemma understood with perfect clarity that this was what her whole life had been leading toward. Not the danger, not the fear, but this. This love that had grown from the strangest beginning into something unshakable. When they finally broke apart, Alessandro pressed his forehead to hers. 3 words, he murmured. You saved me with 3 words. Now I have 3 for you. You already said them. In the study, after the attack. I know, but I want to say them properly. In a garden, with lights, with a ring on your finger. His hands cupped her face, his eyes holding hers with an intensity that made her breath catch. I love you, Gemma Rossi. I love you more than I knew I was capable of loving anyone, and I will spend every day of our lives making sure you never doubt it. I love you too. She kissed him softly. I think I have since you cleared that room, since you trusted a stranger who had every reason to stay silent. You weren't a stranger. Not really. He smiled, that full, genuine smile she'd worked so hard to earn. I think I was waiting for you my whole life. I just didn't know it until you appeared. They returned to the party hand in hand, and the announcement of their engagement turned Lucia's birthday into something larger. Gemma's father cried, actually cried, his weathered hands signing joy and blessings and warnings that Alessandro had better treat his daughter like the treasure she was. I will, sir. Alessandro signed back, clumsy, imperfect, but earnest. He'd been learning for months, determined to communicate with the man who'd raised the woman he loved. I promise. Gemma watched her 2 worlds merge. The father who'd taught her to read lips and survive, the man who'd given her a reason to thrive, and felt something shift inside her. The last wall crumbling, the final wound beginning to heal. Later that night, when the party had wound down and the estate had settled into peaceful quiet, Gemma stood on the terrace and watched the stars emerge. Alessandro joined her, pressing a glass of champagne into her hand, his arm wrapping around her waist. No regrets? He asked. None. She leaned into his warmth. You? Only that I didn't find you sooner. He pressed a kiss to her hair. But maybe that's not how it works. Maybe we both had to become who we needed to be before we could find each other. When did you become a philosopher? Around the time a waitress whispered in my ear and changed everything. His arm tightened around her. You taught me that courage doesn't mean fearlessness. It means choosing to act despite the fear. Choosing good when evil would be easier. His voice softened. You taught me to be the man Marco believed I could become. Gemma's eyes stung. He'd be proud of you. The foundation, the legitimate businesses, the way you kept your promise. He'd be so proud. I hope so. Alessandro was quiet for a moment. I hope wherever he is, he knows that his death meant something, that it changed me, that it led me to you. They stood together as the moon rose, silver light washing over the garden where he'd proposed, the cottage where her father slept peacefully, the house that had become home. Tomorrow would bring new challenges. There were always challenges, but they would face them together, as partners, as family, as husband and wife, soon enough. Gemma thought about the girl she'd been 5 months ago, invisible, exhausted, surviving instead of living. She'd whispered 3 words to a stranger because she couldn't stand by and watch someone die. 3 words had led to this, a love story she never could have imagined, written in danger and redemption and the particular magic of 2 people who chose each other against impossible odds. Some love stories begin with grand gestures, some begin with whispered warnings. Theirs began with courage, the simple, terrifying choice to speak when silence would have been safer. And it would continue, Gemma knew, with that same courage. Day after day, year after year, forever. Come to bed, Alessandro murmured against her ear. We have the rest of our lives to stare at stars. Is that a promise? The first of many. He turned her in his arms, his smile soft in the moonlight. I'm going to spend a lifetime making promises to you, Gemma, and keeping every single one. She kissed him once, softly, then let him lead her inside. The stars would wait. The future would wait. Right now, all that mattered was this: 2 people who'd found each other in the darkness and chosen to build something bright. 3 words had started it all, and 3 more would carry them forward. I love you, always, forever. Thank you all for following this story. If you enjoyed it, please write in the comments where you're watching from. And don't forget to like, subscribe, and share this video as your support is essential for me to continue creating content like this.